What are the prerequisites for successful negotiations? Well, adequate understanding and proof of the facts. You have to have enough understanding of the facts that you can negotiate something to negotiate with. You have to understand, what did the person you're representing do? What did they think the other person did? What does the other side believe happened? And is there some wiggle room in between there, or some remedies that provide a way to resolve that problem between folks? Now that works really better in contracts and even things like divorce than it does when someone commits a murder. Okay? You don't have as much negotiation as some of that stuff. But you also have to have what? To negotiate. The parties negotiating have to understand the law. Because if you don't know what you're talking about, even if you negotiate something, usually negotiations, what has to happen, somebody has to approve it. And typically that's going to be a court. And if what you're saying is so out wacky that there's no court that's going to approve it, you've wasted everyone's time. So that's another thing. You have to understand the laws and regulations that govern. Did you do it in a way that can be approved by some approval authority? Understanding when such matters may not be negotiated. Certain things can't be negotiated. For instance, if a jury determines that a client who committed murder, a capital offense, is so heinous that their only remedy is the electric chair or death by injection, there generally is much in the way of negotiation that a jury has already found that they make that sentence. It's a lot less, you have very little negotiation as a criminal defense lawyer in that case. And what are the few things you can negotiate? That the means they're using to kill the person are so inhuman that even though they may have been an inhuman monster and killed 3 children, or chopped them up to little bits, there's not much negotiation you can do in that case. And that's another thing. Any of you ever seen Silence of the Lambs? Or heard of that movie?
Yeah.
It's where a guy chopped people up, or he took skin of people and wore it.
Yeah.
Well, that's based on a real person. And the person's from my home state of Wisconsin. We have some interesting people in Wisconsin. Not just cheese and packers. And what this guy did is he literally he took and killed people who were basically hitchhikers and stuff in this area of northern Wisconsin. And he just ate them. He was a cannibal. And how they found him is that he lived with his mother. He was this and he babysat. He was a gentleman. He was never married. And he lived in this northern area. And all these people who kind of weren't from there just kind of disappeared. Well, one day, some child of a person who was hitchhiking, a woman that was looking for her daughter, said last place they had seen her was up in the woods, up in this area of northern Wisconsin. And so the police came, and they got to this guy's house, and he said, well, I have no idea what could have happened to her. But he had blood on his jeans and on parts of his, he said, well, what's all this blood on it from? Oh, I was, killing, I'm a deer hunter, I was just killing some deer. I was just cleaning up the deer. He said, well, we want to see. So they went into his kitchen. He had a foot cooking in the kitchen because he was cooking in the body. And so the parts of it, he had chopped it up in pieces and he had wrapped it into wrapping paper to eat later. So he wasn't actually found criminally guilty. Why? Because he was completely insane. You can't criminally find somebody, but they could never let him go. So he went till he died, living in federal prison, or a state prison. And so those of us who were law students, we all wanted to get to see him, because he had done all this stuff, and you got to meet the most famous criminal in the 20th century, as far as the most brutal, wacky, crazy person. So Ed Gein was the guy's name. So if you go to the museum here in Washington, the Crime and Punishment Museum, they have a whole section on it. Because Silence of the Lambs and all these other books, Leatherface, they're all based off of him. One person. It's a real person.
A lot of people plead like insanity or like mental.
They do. And sometimes
it's like not get away with it. You don't get like
well, you don't get away necessarily. Like Ed Gein, he was clearly, they pled mental insanity. And he clearly was crazy as a bedbug. The other thing they had is that he particularly liked to kill women and he'd strip their skin off. And he was trying to make himself, he was transgender, and he wanted to make like a woman's body he could slip into by using his skin. True story, it's really what happened. He's a very strange, sick man. So his defense was totally he was mentally incapable of understanding what he was doing. And if anybody had been around him for any period of time, he had no idea that there was anything wrong with what he was doing. Which is very, very scary. Those are the most scary people. Luckily, there's not too many of them out there in the world. Enough to make it pretty exciting in a bad way. But he was in prison till he died. So if you ever go to the Crime and Punishment Museum, you can see Ed Gein. And we had another guy similar to that in Wisconsin, from Milwaukee, Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah.
Anybody heard of Jeffrey Dahmer?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, he also was, he was into boys. But he would go ahead and he killed a number of people. And then when he got into prison, what happened to him? He killed two. Other prisoners killed him. So, yeah, so he's got his own little part of, you go to the Crime and Punishment Museum down there in Washington too. So these are some of the people who can be your clients. It makes being a defense lawyer a little more exciting than you plan on sometimes. But we try to negotiate, and we have somebody we have tools to negotiate with. For instance, I had a client once who was drunk and very upset because his girlfriend left him, and so he had no money. He decided he wanted to see his girlfriend, had moved across the state of Wisconsin to the state of Iowa. So he went and found a taxi driver, hailed the taxi driver, told him he had a knife, and told him to keep on driving until he got to Iowa. Well, he didn't have a knife, and the driver was never truly at risk other than he was crazy. So when you have those situations, but he was charged for more serious crime. And we were able to reduce his sentence, showing that he never actually did harm anybody, that he was had serious mental issues. But those sort of things, it makes it more interesting every day. It makes you happy that you're not them. And it's really nice to walk out of the prison, and you're out and they're in. And you see some of the folks who are there. It's not necessarily your best and your brightest, but sometimes the most vicious people you'll ever see. But again, everyone in our country, we have what? We have rights under our Constitution. You have the right to a fair trial. You have a right to have testimony and evidence against you before you can be sent to prison.
Have you ever been involved in a case where someone got the death penalty?
Yes. And in those cases, what happens is you can argue for something less than the death penalty under the circumstances, like lifetime in prison with no parole. But a lot of times, in like the military courts, the decision is made by a panel of judges. And if they choose to do that, that's what happens. So, but sometimes you get really lucky, like you can change the law. One thing that I was very lucky to do was in an instance we had a case where somebody was a young soldier, he just joined the Army, and the military was looking to get people who were selling marijuana near this Army base. And so they had an undercover police officer. He acted like he was a new private into the Army, and he became friends with this kind of goofy guy. And he said, hey, why don't we go to, and the military, the police knew there was this guy selling marijuana right outside the military base at a liquor store. So he said, here's $20, why don't you get us some marijuana and we'll smoke some marijuana. Well, the young soldier said, gee, I could get in trouble. My new friend could get in trouble if we do marijuana. So he went and they bought, what did he buy? He bought a 6-pack of beer. And so when the policeman came back to him and he gave him the 6-pack of beer, he said, you're under arrest for attempted buying marijuana. He said, but I didn't buy marijuana. I got us some beer, because we were both over 18. In those days, before it was 21. He says, there's nothing illegal by having beer. And he was tried, and they found him guilty, even though he hadn't done anything he hadn't given any money or done anything to actually complete the crime. And so we argued that was unfair, and I won. And that changed the whole way that they handled those type of cases in the military. Now if you start thinking about doing a crime, but you stop, and you undo anything or you're not doing anything more, they can't put you in jail for attempt. You have to actually have done something more than just think about doing it. You have to actually take in a solid step towards doing something like giving the person money for the drugs or whatever. So, and that was a big change in the law. And so that's the kind of stuff that can be very helpful. You say, well, gee, there's not a lot of negotiation in that, but there sometimes is. Where you go, what courts you go to, how it's presented, and how you work with the defense. If you're the government or if you're the defense, how you work with the government. There's a lot of things in how you do a case that require everything you do, you have to negotiate with someone. You have to be able to work with people. So, and what are some other things to be successful when you're negotiating? That you have to be knowledgeable of what the facts, the laws, the regulations, the procedures are to resolve what are the facts that happen and get some sort of agreement between the parties. Or what's the laws that are involved? If one party says, no, I don't think this law applies, the other does, you're not going to have a chance to fix anything or resolve it. And also, what has to happen, especially in a criminal case, your client has to at least agree with where you came with, right? You can't say, I'm going to send you down to the, I think you ought to go get, I think, you're a really horrible person, I'm your lawyer, but I'm going to tell him, hey, this guy should fry. Literally, you should get to see the hot seats and electric chair. Can't do that. Because what do you mean? You as a lawyer will get disbarred. You can't do those sort of things. Because that's not okay within our system of justice. So you have to have client willingness to approve what you're doing. You have to talk to your client and get your client to agree. And that takes a lot of times a lot of negotiation. Because some people, no matter if 5 people saw him shoot somebody and it's on video, the client will tell you, I never did that. Well, here, let me play it for you again on the TV. Well, that wasn't me. That was my, my ugly twin brother. You don't have any twin brothers. Well, let's start talking turkey here. Do you want to go to prison your whole life or do you not? Because if that's what you're going to tell the court, you're going to be in prison your whole life. That's negotiation. You may not think of it that way, but that truly is. And so that's what we talk about, is negotiation. So we go to the next one.